Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm here with Dr. Malini Iyer. She's going to be co-teaching a class with me on the Lunar Nodes in February 18th through the 25th. Oops, what did I just do here? Wrong one. Oh, there you go. And in the class, she's going to be actually teaching about Rahu Ketu and DNA. Malini is a PhD in genetic. She does all kinds of genetic research and whatnot, and she's mapped the influence, or actually the literal activities, of Rahu and Ketu over to the DNA. And we're going to learn here 15-20 minutes about how the DNA works, how Rahu and Ketu kind of work within that, and then elaborate a bit about what we're going to be talking about. So welcome, Malini. Nice to see you today. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me here and giving me this opportunity. I think I learned this concept and principle from you, that everything we study about the planets and the stars and in astrology are universal principles, right? And when that started to sink in, I was doing my PhD around that time, and doing a lot of different kinds of experiments. And I started to play this little game in my head all the time, wherein I was like, oh, how do the planets show up here? How do the planets show up there? Because the macrocosm, which is the whole cosmos, is actually reflected in the microcosm, the cells, it's different organelles in the cell, and then the literal genetic material, right? So even if you die, your genetic material survives through a follicle of your hair or through your nails. The genetic material is always there on this planet. And I had to then start to play these games with myself. And that's when these realizations and epiphanies started to happen. That, especially with Rahu and Ketu, both you and I have prominent nodes. And it's very hard to understand what the nodes are doing. There's not really a lot of explanation, and it's a lot of internal introspection as to what they're doing. And I found my answers when I used to do a lot of gene, I still do a lot of gene expression studies. Um, and just looking at the DNA, right? So your entire genetic code, which is, if you think about it, it's all your karmas and all your lineage is karma. Like everybody, all your ancestors, everybody, all their karmas is compacted and given to you in the form of a DNA. And what DNA is basically just information. It's just information. It's not good or bad. It's just information stored in between two parallel strands that never intersect, which is what Rahu and Ketu are. If you think about it in the sky, they're always opposite each other. They're parallel to each other. They never intersect. If you look at the South Indian chart, which Sam loves to use, and I love to use, I only use the South Indian chart, you can easily see they're always parallel, opposite to each other. They never intersect. And between Rahu and Ketu is what all your karmas are stored. So that's how I started to process it and make connections. And if you really think about it, this double strands of that genetic material is actually wound together. It's not, if you just pull it straight, it will be several thousand meters long, right? So it's wound together and it's knotted together. Literally, there it's knotted together. What that knot is Ketu, right? It's all your karmas wound together. And then what Rahu does, if you try to understand in terms of genetics, it's the part of us that comes and starts to unzip parts of that karma in a very accelerated way. It happens very quickly. Rahu is very quick, right? It unravels parts of that information and then it's read. Now, the genetic code is always read in reverse. Rahu and Ketu are traveling always retrograde in the sky. So they're always, everything is read in reverse. And then I put Mercury there in that diagram, but then it's the function of planets like Mercury and Sun and Moon and all the other planets come and then understand what the genetic material is in the apparent forward motion, right? So I think that was really fascinating when that light bulb went on in my head, and I was like, this makes sense. Karma is being unraveled in reverse, and the other planets are coming in the forward motion and really helping us live that karma.
So this is
And
fascinating because, again, when we understand, and in the weekend course, we're going to be talking about these things in great detail. Well, at least Malini is, and then I'll be there. See, what happens when we do these courses is it's two of us teaching. So most of the material I'm going to be teaching about the Rahu Ketu, and then Malini is also there. We're adding context, personal case studies. Malini does a lot of readings and whatnot. But then this part of the course, she's going to teach, and she already taught this before. And what we wind up finding out is that, you're going to learn literally how the DNA and the RNA work. And when something comes in, something new, like, for example, when you start having diseases or problems with the replication process in the DNA, that's when you start getting all kinds of bad cells made and whatnot. Because literally what happens is that everything that you're taking in, like your food and everything else, how that's impacting your physiology is certain things go in and rewrite the DNA has to then unzip, which is the Rahu part is the unzipping, and then the zipping back together again is Ketu. And
yes,
and the Ketu part is the aggregate, not just of every experience you've had, but every experience every being on this planet has had. So, for example, your DNA contains everything from when you were a single-celled organism to when you pass through the kingdom of a chicken and a lizard and whatnot. All of that, the fact that when the sperm meets the egg and the DNA explodes in the mother's womb, what happens is this entire evolutionary process of the entire history of this planet starts. And it gets all the way down to something that primal and ends up with something this specific as these two creatures doing this. All of it is in there. And so, again, K2 is everything your soul has ever experienced. So you can see very clearly we're not just shooting arrows at the moon here. These are exactly the same things that your karma is based on. K2 is everything that your soul has gone through, all of the stuff you've forgotten, all the stuff that means today, all your past lives. And Rahu is that knife edge of the things that your soul has come here to experience in this lifetime. And it's it's in real time, just like the DNA. So was that a decent explanation, Malini?
Yeah, that is bang on. It's every single organism, every single cell that has been on this planet, being that general to this specific. I love the way you said it, being this specific as me and you and our hair
And the color of
follicle
our
and
hair and the fact that our teeth are a certain shape and
yeah,
everything from the fact that you were an amoeba, which,
yeah,
also every amoeba is different, to the fact that, you have the same kind of incisors as your grandfather or whatever.
yeah. It's pretty fascinating and pretty brilliant, and that's why I say astrology is my spiritual foundation, because every single insight, if you keep going deeper, is right there in front of you. We are
Yeah.
not different from something as abstract as Rahu and Ketu, which are like, really, these are grahas that don't have physical bodies. Yet you can see them, like in our system. Our entire system is made up of that, right? And you can't see the genetic material through naked eyes. You need like some really cutting edge technology to even decipher what it is doing. You can not see it under a microscope. You can't see the genetic material under a microscope. You'll see the nucleus. You'll see like a woolen ball that is like wound up completely, but you can't see the single strands. That's what Rahu and Ketu are. You can't see them, but they exist because they are the entire makeup.
And it's very similar to how, like, for example, we just started to be able to examine and interact with DNA a few decades ago, right? It was in the 90s. Yeah.
So in the 60s is when the Human Genome Project started. That's when they started to figure out what. So Watson and Crick got the Nobel Prize in the late 50s, early 60s, around that time, and then they started to decode how the genetic material is made up of, what are these nucleotides, and how they are. So it's fairly recent. This knowledge is like 50 years old. It's not
Yeah,
that.
I was talking about when they actually mapped the genome when they mapped it, because
It was
I'm
in
a
the
layman,
80s.
so DNA started to be reliably understood and used. Like the big first thing happened was like the OJ trial. That was like the first time where they started using like DNA evidence, where you could go in and see, no, it's this person.
Yes.
Before that, they relied so much on fingerprints, which can get smudged, but then DNA is like, no, this is this cat right here, right? And again, so in the weekend course, and as you can see, there's a link down here. If you register for the course now, even before we do it, you can get 8 hours of, more than 8 hours of free classes. It doesn't include this, but it's on classes that I've taught on the Lunar Nodes before. One of them is bonus class that Malini and I taught before, also on the Lunar Nodes. So you can go to nodesclass.com, register, and then the weekend course is only $47 for about 10 to 15 hours, including the class time and then the follow-up. But in the weekend course, this will be explained, all the planets. I'm going to be explaining all the planets in relationship to Rahu and Ketu, also the houses, the signs, and a lot of ways to understand Rahu and Ketu, even as they relate to things like sexuality, how they distort and magnify things, childhood, all kinds of things. Like your whole life really revolves around the sort of distortion field that Rahu and Ketu show, because Rahu really shows that sort of power of incarnation that compelled you to come here as this unique creature in many ways. And again, you can trace that back to you as a unique creature is shown literally scientifically through the DNA. Like you could sit there, and if they had a way to take strands of DNA, and they're trying to do that now with research where they're trying to bring back extinct animals and whatnot, just by taking the DNA and resequencing it and turning it back into the person, because it's literally like the ingredients.
Yeah, they're trying to do that. I mean, Jurassic Park, that movie, was based on that concept. It was way ahead of its time, but right now we have the technology to do that. So people are attempting to.
And so think of how neutral that is. Like, again, something difficult that happens can get into the DNA. And of course, we've just been through things with vaccines and whatnot. Of course, we're going to get into all those hot button issues. But now that we've all become, amateur, DNA experts since COVID happened, and we're all experts in RNA and DNA, you'll actually learn how this stuff works as well, Molly. It's a nice little crash course on how your biology works on this level and how your karma is shown in your physiology. And again, we've been flirting with these ideas for years. Well, your body shows it all. Your body holds the pain and all that. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But it's more true than you might think, because literally on the molecular cellular level, this is where it's happening. And again, even just the archetype of the double-helix and the fact that Rahu and Ketu never meet. I mean, you can see this diagram. It's not a stretch. And by the way, this isn't in the text and whatnot, because they didn't explain that stuff. Most of the stuff like this aren't in the text. So it's a way for you to understand and approach the lunar nodes and see them in a way that's also more neutral than just all of the fear-mongering. They're bad, bad, bad. It's just an evolutionary process. And again, you could look at the stuff of Ketu, of the childhood and whatnot, and say, oh yeah, that's all the hidden, buried stuff that's scary. It's not just scary. It's the good stuff too. Rahu is the accelerated karma. It's not just where we're confused. It's also where that leads us to that razor's edge of evolution. So Malini, please take it from here.
Yeah, I actually really love how you have titled this course, which is Befriending the Shadows. And we've been talking about it for a really long time, which is not to look at the nodes as malefics. I know that that's how it is described in the text, but it was for people of that day and age, which they knew exactly what the words meant. They were not that black and white, right? So befriending the shadows and moving from darkness to light. That is exactly what the nodes are. They are. You can't just paint them as all black. You have to integrate them. And these ideas and concepts that we are presenting in this course will help you to actually start to reflect back and be more comfortable with your nodes, and not flip out when you go into a Rahu Dasha, or not like, worry and fear and be in anxiety when Ketu Dasha starts, right? These are the times when you start to think that way. Um,
And you
and
connect to something, again, like ancient and primal and forgotten and overlooked with the Ketu, and something exciting and that next phase of evolution with Rahu. But yes, there's confusion. And when we're confused, it doesn't often feel good. It gets us outside of our comfort zone. And one of the things that I know Malini's heard me explain these things many times, so have other students, but when those categories of benefic and malefic really come down to the feeling and the nature of how it feels to us, because the rishis were aware that we're very emotional. So it's just, we feel it feels confusing when the nodes line up, and that tends to feel unsettling. So it's put in this sort of bag of malefics. Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, it tends to feel comforting. Oh, I'm happy. Oh, there's a nice person. Rahu and Ketu is like, oh, it's confusing. I'm not sure what this is. So that tends to feel unsettling, but it wasn't a judgment, because all of these are divine beings. They're all divine forces in you. And it's just understanding where that's taking you. And so, a real quick thing here just to say, I did a recent update where I was reminded of a story that my guru Amma told about dogs, and how you can't let dogs chew on a bone too much, because there are a lot of things about bones that can injure the dog, like they can swallow fragments. But the other thing is, when they chew on the bone, they can like injure their gums and like be swallowing blood and mistaking the blood that they're swallowing for like eating something, because they want to eat blood, but they're really just swallowing their own blood from their own injuries, and they're just like gnawing on the same bone. You got to take it away so they don't injure themselves. It's similar to the way the confusion of the nodes can be. We can just be kind of like gnawing on this bone, thinking that we're getting nutrition and nutrient, but we're just confused by that kind of false sense of nutrition. And so the shadows of the nodes are what we need to understand. So we need to, illuminate them so they don't eclipse those luminaries.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Thank you for saying that story. I'm going to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I did it's an Instagram post with that. And so it's a very interesting metaphor. But any final thoughts you wanted to bring up there, Malini? Because this is going to be great. And look, folks, how often do you get to learn literally from a PhD about how DNA actually works, how it works in relationship literally to like all the planets and karma, and again, it's not a stretch, it's not a reach. People, because, and I'm saying this in advance because there'll be people that are, what text is this from? What text? Like, this isn't in a text, because they didn't even really know about DNA per se that way. But if you look in the text, you understand this is what they were saying, and this is how you modernize these teachings. And again, it's really even hard to debate once you understand what the nodes are, what the DNA is, what all the other planets are. The way Malini lays it out, it's going to be really fantastic, even just to learn about this part of your nature. So I'm really looking forward to hearing it again. Anything else you'd like to add to this, Malini?
No, that's it. I think I'm looking forward to people coming to this course and enjoying.
Great. Yeah. So again, the class is on February. It's on 2 weekends. Often I do this on one weekend, but because February 18th is Mahashivaratri, we're going to do the first one on Mahashivaratri. Then we're going to stay up all night to Lord Shiva. So this is a very auspicious day anyway. And Shiva is very connected to the nodes. He's, for example, Rahu rules Ardra Nakshatra, which is Shiva's domain. And then we'll do it the next Saturday as well, February 25th. So 2 Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific in your home. Again, if you can't attend in real time, these are recorded. Of course, you get a lifetime access to these. And when you register now, you also get access to many bonus classes that I've taught on the nodes, some of them with Dr. Malini. And also I did a class called Releasing the Serpent, which is also a very interesting way to reconcile the opposition of the nodes. People really love this. And we're really going to go into understanding these things, because in many ways, the key to understanding the nodes is also understanding everything else. So it's also going to be a kind of primer in very specific focused aspects of each planet, each sign, and each house. Because this is what Rahu and Ketu modify. They modify everything they're interacting with, but they do it in a very specific way. And we're also going to be unwinding the story of the birth of Rahu and Ketu through the Samudra Manthan story and all of this stuff, so that you have a firm understanding based on the classical text in a modern way, and not just something that's abstract. So you can look at your chart and also see, oh yeah, that's right. I don't have any planets with the nodes, but it's really affecting this house axis and whatnot. Isn't that right, Malini?
Yeah. Living examples of it.
Yeah, Malini and I both have Rahu and Ketu in the 1st and 7th house. Opposite. I have Rahu in the 1st, Malini has Ketu in the 1st. But it's also, one of the biggest reasons why I've done a lot of work on the nodes is because, they're very prominent in my life. And like everything is in astrology, many times we really understand that kind of thing, that how we're sort of vibrating and sort of resonating. So you'll get to see that too. We both have the nodes in the 1st house with either its ruler or an exalted planet. So it's we're also kind of we're kind of Rahu Ketu shadow people also.
Yeah.
So
you'll get
we'd
to
love
see
to
that.
have you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What?
I said you'll get to see that over the weekend. So yeah, do come.
On this weekend course, you'll learn the healing myth related to the Samudra Manthan, or the churning of the milk ocean, toxicity or purification, transforming toxicity and poison into nectar with the lunar nodes, blindness and ignorance, the crippling false choice created by the nodes. It's like an everyday psychosis that just seems normal to you. Fated connections like your parents, your lovers, most of the deep entanglements of your life, sex, drugs, and power, many of the unconscious power plays, charisma, hallucinogenic qualities of other people are seen by the nodes. It's also the Kundalini, the goddess awakening. The nodes are the Kundalini, but exactly how does that work? Also tracking the serpent as it bites and heals. You'll always need to know where the nodal axis is relative to your chart. So there's so much more.